We are back. Feed the Trolls is starting all over again, and it's Rostermania, which means we're going to have so much to talk about. Austin is joining us. Did you have a good break? Did you have it when the players were all having their break? Austin, did you have a little bit of downtime as well?
I did, actually. I went to Australia and was completely detached from the game for the first time in a long time. It was great. It was fantastic.
Does it take a million hours to get there?
It does. It was miserable. Okay. Yeah, it was miserable, but I really enjoyed it.
Oh, fair enough.
Very nice down there.
That's what everyone says, but Australians and a lot of South Africans leave for Australia, so maybe one day we'll go visit. Thorin, have you ever been there? Ever done that?
I haven't been to any of these places. I just stay in the motherland. Well, I don't even want to do learning anymore, but I've never been to South Africa or Australia, unfortunately.
South Africa is the best. I keep telling everyone, but no one's coming here. I'd love them to bring like a Counter-Strike event. There'll be no viewership because we don't have a really large fan base, but it'll be fun for me. So hopefully we can do that.
They keep holding them in America, so
there we go.
Whatever.
And we have no time difference with Europe,
Exactly.
Makes more sense, yeah. Plus it's really pretty. Let's get into it though. Obviously, you know how Feed the Trolls works. If you don't, I'm just gonna give you a refresher. We choose a topic that all of you, the trolls, are talking about nonstop on the internet, and we dive into it and hopefully give you a little bit more nuance to it. So of course today we got to talk about the big one. NiKo going to Team Falcons finally gets announced. And straight off the bat, Thorin, for me, I was surprised that everyone on the internet was so surprised. Have we not known that this is going to be happening for months?
This is where I feel like people do just follow sports. There's a certain type of person follows it as a soap opera and not actually as like a competitive discipline about who's good and how did they play and stuff. Because I feel like for real, you saw this every time they won those blasts. People for real, like a soap opera, wanted it to be like, well, you know what, guys? Maybe I will stay for another year. Like, oh my goodness, he's staying. I totally ship NiKo. I feel like that was it. Because what's weird is, to me, they actually completely failed this last major. Like, actually, the way that major semi-final went, you just turn around and go, you know what, actually, fuck off. I don't even want to see you next year. Like, everyone else, for some weird reason, still thinks. I feel like it's a mixture of two factors, isn't it? One, by the end, people sort of knew that despite all the roster rumors, they're probably not getting the great super team of Jimphat and Monsi. So, first of all, I think once people thought that wasn't happening, they themselves maybe didn't want NiKo to go. And then I think the other aspect is people just think this G2 team was really good, and bizarrely, they want to like redo that for the next year. Even though, if I had to guess, purely my own speculation, I don't think all 5 members of that G2 lineup would also agree to do that, quite frankly, whether they had the choice or not. No, I agree with you. To me, I actually thought even some of the results of G2 was because everyone knew this was a done deal and there never was a chance NiKo was coming back. And in some ways, I actually feel like that some sort of smoothed the wheels, as it were, on the way out, and that there wasn't really any big drama. I feel like everyone except, like you're saying, the fans knew this was going to happen, definitely.
Not only that, though, I mean, so Austin, I remember during the major when G2 played against Heroic in the playoffs and they just beat them. It was on that third map. I was hosting that one at the time, and I'd say it was like, for me, that was the game of the major. But I know at the end of it, I probably pissed off a lot of G2 fans because I kept saying to my analysts, I was like, I mean, it's cool that G2's won. Well done to them, but should they not be concerned? Should we not be concerned? I don't know if this looked good enough. It felt, and I think a lot of G2 fans are like, you should be celebrating. They've made it through. Like, now's not the time. But it was concerning to me. And then obviously next game they play, they get knocked out. I don't think G2's been playing at the level that a player like NiKo wants to be playing at for a very long time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, almost losing to that Heroic team who really hadn't accomplished that much in the last year is definitely a shaky result. And then losing to FaZe, even though FaZe is FaZe, I still think that that's not really the result that you want if you're on G2 at that point. Like, G2 is trying to win the major with that roster, like 100%. As far as like NiKo actually making the move goes, I think from the fans' perspective, you've heard rumors for years now at this point of Falcons getting the best players in the world. We're going to have Simple. We're going to try to get m0NESY and NiKo, and it just never happens. So, I didn't think that it was actually going to happen this time. Like, just
you thought he'd do it again, like last second to get cancelled, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it definitely surprised me to see that he was actually going. And then once he was going, I was like, oh, well, then surely everything's going to fall into place. And then it didn't. So, now we have this team.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the fun part of this conversation, right, when we get into that. But let's focus in now. So the announcement comes. Surprise, surprise, not really. We all knew it was happening. NiKo is going to Falcons. And then the internet was super divided, right? So you had a huge amount of people who just immediately started hating on the guy, saying, oh, well, he's just sold out to take the bag. So Do you think that's what happened? I mean, Austin, do you think it was a sellout to take the bag?
I mean, it's hard to say where his mind is at, to be honest.
You're not in Congress now, mate. Come on.
I think definitely he wanted to have an organization that could get the players that he felt that he deserved to have next to him. So in that sense, yes, 100%. And plus, when he was probably in discussions with them, the talks of having m0NESY go with them, it just seems like he can have everything he wants and then also get the bag as well. So I feel like definitely that's a big incentive for him. But I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure anymore if it was worth it for him.
I mean, Thorin, where do you sit on this? Do you think this was him taking the bag? Is he just throwing it all away, his hopes and dreams of a major and all of that, and just signing off for the paycheck? Or do you think that people are maybe a little bit blinded by the Team Falcons hate?
My problem is I don't really know why NiKo of all the people joining Falcons is the one who gets dubbed with taking the bag thing. Because first of all the players who've joined Falcons, I think he actually would be the most eligible ever if he tested the free market. In theory, by the way, am I missing something? Wouldn't every other one of these massive teams like Vitality and FaZe, all the rest, all just be lining up to go, we'll sign you too? In which case, by the way, if you only want the bag, you could get maybe a potentially similar bag, but with a better team in that scenario. So I don't really know why people think it's just the money, because think about why he didn't join at the end of 2023. Supposedly, for real, when I came to, in the metaphor, put the pen to paper to sign, he sort of thought to himself, well, they haven't really got all the league spots, actually. Maybe I shouldn't do this for money. That implies to me he doesn't just do it only for money. I even got the sense personally, if you look at when the rumor came out last year, it was maybe even implied. It wasn't that the whole time he was just look, hit me up in a year or whatever, and I'll do it then. It's implied to me they had to go back to him and sort of re-pitch him on the idea. And that's why, if you notice, simultaneously you had all these rumors come. Maybe m0NESY goes with him. Oh, Simple's coming back on loan. I actually saw a lot of that as trying to almost court NiKo and show him look, if you join, it won't just be you, and it won't just be you with the bag, mate. We'll put players around you. Also, I'll just throw this out there. I don't know why people never consider this. I know now everyone's calling zonic a fraud. I actually think if you're someone like NiKo, that's actually the sort of person that's a massive reason to join Falcons. Think about all the teams that have denied NiKo championships over the years. If I'm anyone, by the way, who wasn't on Astralis, the whole time I'm just can I have zonic? I would be doing that if I was the one who wasn't device, basically. So I don't know that I totally buy that myself, because I actually feel in CS right now, NiKo of everyone could probably get 80% of his Falcons salary, but the best team if he wanted, or the best roster slots, or the best IG, whatever he wanted. So I don't really know how to do. I actually sort of see it more as something I mean, this will sound a bit weird. Maybe we can get into it. It's up to you. I see it as more of an indictment of the G2 org. It's that point I made to you on a past episode, Tech Girl, which is, if it was even rumored, which it is, that m0NESY will at some point leave G2. He's not just going to be a lifer there, which, by the way, would be a totally reasonable expectation. He's so young. You've built around this guy for him. Also, it's supposed to be G2. He's supposed to be the best esports org in the world. My real question is, why do the two best players they've had in the last few years seemingly only have the rule, whatever happens in the future definitely won't be on G2? That's actually a bit weird to me. So I don't know. When you consider how many years NiKo was on G2, and I think they did, I wouldn't say they mismanaged the roster, but I think they made some underwhelming moves, or some weird sort of zig when you could have zagged type moves. So I would say, and maybe I think part of it is, I think he also just wanted to be off G2, but I don't know. I kind of find the idea it's just for the bag a bit whack to me, because I feel that's more younger players. If Prince, if m0NESY had left, you could maybe say that one's more like that. That's bro, why are you leaving? You let them build around you. But I think NiKo's put in his enough years that I think it's a bit too cynical to say it's just the money, especially because also, as far as I know, by the way, the contract he has had in FaZe G2 would be really fucking amazing relative to the time he was in the squads.
I get really annoyed when I see that argument being used online, and there's a couple of reasons. One, so what? It's normally my first response. If you show me a single person who doesn't go, hey, I get to go to a team where they're going to pay me really well and fly me business class, but also they have told me that they are going to spend a lot of money to get the best pieces around me, which means I can win more, which as a player I would like to do. What player in the world isn't going to say, hell yeah, I'm there? Right? Unless you're Jimphat because you want a specific piece. But the point is, there's no one that's going to say no to that. And I think that the hates, it kind of gets to me, because I was if anyone else was put in this position, they would take it. It would have been different, I think, if we knew NiKo was going and we knew what the pieces were going to be on the way there. So if someone said, hey, he has this team that's not, let's say it's the original sort of Falcons from last year, and they're not doing very well, but you can come. And then he says yes, I'd say, okay, cool. Seems like it's a little bit of a cop-out, but that wasn't the case. We knew there was a rebuild coming, so that always seems a little bit unfair to me. I want to get into the zonic conversation in a bit, but I hate the fact that fans are saying that, Austin, and I think that it's also a little bit unfair. I understand that G2 there is a love there from fans that isn't always similar with other organizations, but you also can't expect a player to stay in the same team for year after year after year to not win a major, to not lift enough big trophies. This is someone who wants to go down. I'm presuming, I can't speak for NiKo, I don't actually know, but I presume he wants to go down being remembered as one of the best, and he's got to win trophies to do that, right?
Yeah, I never really considered it from what Thorin said about how maybe it's just G2 as like a management or organization that he doesn't want to be a part of, or maybe the team. And so now thinking about it, it does make a lot more sense. And for him to want to like leave the team, join Falcons. And I think it is definitely unfair for fans to say like, oh, he's just taking the bag, because from his perspective, you're right. He does want to win as many championships as he can. And what player wouldn't take the opportunity if given? Like, oh, we can get anybody that you want. I would be there too. You know, if that offer was given to me, I would be there without even thinking twice.
By the way, the most underrated part of Falcons, I actually do think, is specifically if you are someone like NiKo and you get on the inside. This hasn't happened yet. We haven't actually had a superstar that went there. Like SunPayUs wasn't had enough years yet to truly get that status. The reason why, if Simple had actually been signed for real, or they'd ever gotten like NiKo or a Monacy, the reason it'd be interesting to me is I also think that's the part that every fan right now, while it looks bad, is misunderstanding. Is imagine if you were NiKo when you were in FaZe and G2. Those are really good squads, if you remember, with really good players. But if you remember, Austin will remember this, there was key periods in history. It was famously with IGLs in FaZe, and then I would say it was with what were they going to do with the Nexer and the Huxley thing for the last year and a half. There's actually been long periods of time where actually this team almost seems like it can't get rid of a player at once or get a player at once. And if you're someone like NiKo and you're sat there as like the franchise player, that's really frustrating. I've heard in FaZe, by the way, it would even be like the org would agree, they'd agree, the player would agree, but it would just take too long and it just wouldn't get done as a deal. Again, that's the one thing in theory, once you're in, if you are NiKo or you're Monacy, once you are on Falcons, first of all, I don't care what any fan says on Twitter, right? The second one of those players joins, it becomes like 100 times more enticing for another player to join. The real problem now is you have everything except the NiKo, the Monacy type player. So everyone's sort of holding to wait to see if you ever get that. Once you have that player, it becomes, and then if they really do have this unlimited budget, surely that gets rid of that problem that we're just talking about. Like, I would actually spin it the other way. I would say, if you're NiKo, maybe a controversial statement, if you're NiKo and you've had an incredibly long career, which, by the way, it's amazing you're even still on top now with a chance to be the best. This is actually, I'd argue, the highest percentage chance to end the last few years of your career with like a truly world-class roster, assuming, I am taking for granted, that they will build these rosters around them. If it's true what they've sold the bill of to zonic, and admittedly they did say the snapping too, that they will keep spending money and putting people around you, this is a great way to not just be in a good one lineup, but potentially a couple of good lineups on the way out. You don't know how many more years he has. Maybe he has 2 years left. Who knows?
I mean, it was something that we believe Snappy was told at the start of his tenure, and we all know how that worked out. So it obviously leads us into the conversation where you did bring his name up, and we've got to talk about it, because obviously zonic was making a play for NiKo for a long time.
Yep.
Last year, we know he wanted it. Now he's got the player, but he did have a pretty horrific 2024. It was Falcons jumped out the nest, and they did not soar, they did not fly, they just crashed right down at the bottom of the rocks. And that baby bird was dead. I mean, that was it. Is he a fraud?
We're going to keep stacking them.
Is he a fraud? Because that's what the fans are saying now. Zonic's the fraud. All
I know,
he did
just
one
asking
interview.
philosophically. It just feels wrong to even ask that question, though, doesn't it? Like, bro, he won 5 majors. Like, it's pretty good. It's pretty good, you know. I don't know about you, Austin, but crazy statement. I don't feel like you can win 5 majors and be a fraud at the role where you won the 5 majors. Just me.
I do kind of agree with that.
I'm just having fun. I'm like, you know what I've started doing? I'm just going to take stuff off like HLTV and Reddit, and then just take the statement and change it into a question. And then you hear how ridiculous it is. 1 bad year. And then
enough about Jay
out...
Clocky's Twitter. So, sorry, what? Oh, shit, it's just still on. My bad. Keep going.
But like, that's the other thing. I think the one thing that's cool about zonic is like he does very honest interviews. Like he he just sort of says what has to be said. It was pretty hectic to have him.
Someone's honest to a fault at this point. It feels like he's sort of given ammunition against himself every time now, doesn't it? You know.
I was going to say, I was like, I don't think it's going to be happening much more. I mean, I do think coming out saying, "Hey, listen, this actually wasn't the lineup that I ever wanted, so like it was really bad." But what are you going to do? I mean, I get the commentary that it maybe
You want to
was a
just
bit of a
dive in and tell him,
cop-out.
don't you? You want to go, bro, I know what you mean by that. I know what you mean, but that just sounds like that doesn't count and that wasn't my fault. That even though I know that's not what you mean, that is definitely what they get. That's why, in a weird way, he actually does need like a political advisor or something, like a PR management team. Because I don't think he knows how that comes across when he says, because every time I see these headlines, I just go, oh, he's wrecked now. He's done himself funny.
But I always like it as well. I've been at events where he's done an interview and he's just been like, well, we played like shit. And I was like, thank you. Like, no one else speaks honestly and says that. Like, but it's obviously now backfired because he's made these comments. I mean, the pressure is now on because he's made the comments.
For sure.
He's now got the team that he has. He gets NiKo, which is the star he wants. And then he picks up the heroic core, which, let's be honest, it feels like maybe that was because m0NESY decided, I don't know what happened with m0NESY. We thought m0NESY would be going with NiKo, right? Is this the team zonic wants for 2025? Austin, what do you think?
No. Absolutely not. I think he's probably already thinking about next season and how he's going to get m0NESY and everybody else that he wants, but I don't think he's going to be unhappy to work with these players. I definitely think that there's a lot of respect given towards Magis and NiKo and also zonic from like kyxsan and Degster. These guys probably have been working alongside them for a very long time. So I think that they can probably come together. And to be honest, Heroic, they didn't do that good as a team, but these players that they picked actually have some pretty good individual showings. And I think that it could actually be a pretty good roster. So maybe this is the team. After a few months, maybe we'll see, but I don't think this is what, I think going into the season, zonic is probably still, thinking about the future.
Thorin?
Obviously isn't. Obviously the team he wanted was the Jimphat and the m0NESY one, which by the way are totally reasonable. Obviously, you shoot for the stars, don't you? With that said, though, I actually think he's got sort of a pretty decent compromise team, though. That's actually, believe it or not, it's when the actual final roster was announced that I realised, this is just people hating on Falcons, bro. And it's got nothing to do with even zonic now. This isn't even about what happened last year and the results, or the whole, will they actually be a good team? It's just about people don't like the org or they do. I think also, by the way, I'll just throw this out there. I know it sounds weird, but I also think people don't like the idea that the org can just spend whatever the money they want. And so in a weird way, that makes people think, well, unless you win immediately, then it was all bullshit, wasn't it? Which is a bit weird because we've had rich orgs before and you're allowed to just be the richest org and sign all the players you want. So I don't really know, but I'll just say what I said on Twitter. If you actually look at the roster, what you have to do is reset the expectations and just go, how good would this roster be? Right? This roster isn't the top 3 roster in the world immediately. But when you consider the heroic roster, actually, where they ended the year up, reliably they were a top 8 team. That was right the sweet spot they'd just gotten into. As you saw, but I agree with you, they could have beaten G2. You can argue, by the way, they played G2 on all 3 maps in that series. It's just G2 had people like NiKo just shooting people in the head. But I'll say this, if you consider that squad was not a bad, I think most analysts agreed that the roles all made sense. This is just a better version of that roster. You took Nerds and you actually did one of the only upgrades possible, which is the bloody NiKo, just the best rifler. And you kept all the rest, and then you replaced fucking Shush, who, by the way, was actually slumping a bit at the end, with fucking Megas, probably the greatest, plus minus, anchor type, low resources type player ever. So I don't know. I actually think this has sleeper potential also to be good, because I think you're right, Austin. I think what will happen is this is where the new season terminology instead of years is going to be really useful, because for the first season, this is obviously his lineup, right? So if it doesn't work out, you go, yeah, it's all right. I was waiting until the end of the season to convince m0NESY and Jimphat to come. But if it does work out, then you just bring one or none of them, and you just go, in the meantime, we worked out. I think you're actually in quite a good sort of middle spot at this point in time, especially if, as is alluded to, unlike every other team, this is why, by the way, I think NiKo wants to join this org. They're playing by different rules. I can tell you, if you're in Team Liquid or you're G2 or Vitality and you do massive player moves and it doesn't work out after one season, ask Spinks about this. You just have to wait for another season, mate. We just spent all that money. We're not going to just double down again. We're going to wait and see how this plays, or someone will have to buy you up for megabucks. So the key thing for me with this whole topic is Falcons actually going to let you spend again? If they make you keep this roster, I still think it could be good, but obviously it's not the one I'm sure that he dreamed of the whole of last year when he thought he was getting the big name players.
Are you not concerned because the team last year was such a dismal, best term I could use, clusterfuck, excuse my language, but it was a mess. On paper, those players weren't as horrible as what I thought they were in the server when they were playing. It just didn't seem to work. This feels yes, it's an upgrade, but it's not a huge upgrade. I just worry, are we not throwing the same thing at the wall and hoping that it's going to stick this time?
I feel like in this case, you have more individual power to get them over the line in a lot of these games. Like, imagine G2 rematches Heroic, but they play with this roster instead. I actually think that they just win. I think having NiKo and Magus would get them over the line to beat them and maybe even beat FaZe. Who knows? Like, it could have been a completely different story if that was the case. So I actually think that this is, I don't want to be too optimistic, but I do think this is probably one of the best cases they could have got after not getting Jimmy and m0NESY. So
the only angle I'm scared about is this one angle, Techco, which is, first of all, people heard that rumor, which apparently is just true, that they were going to bench Degster anyway in Heroic. So it's a bit, if you don't know, that's probably not just only an org move. That probably means like Tessus and kyxsan signed off on that. And then it was like, oh, shit, oh, hey, Degster, still want to be in a team with you. That's awkward already. And then there is the fact that they themselves have to know they weren't the ones that zonic chose first. Like, no one likes to be the second choice, do they? So that's the only one wrinkle I'll add in. Maybe that could add, a weird psychological component or make gelling harder or make people not buy in. But if that's not the case, I actually also think another underrated part is the reason I also was a fan of the Heroic squad is I actually get the feel a lot of these players are players you can coach and work with. And they all, by the way, I think people like kyxsan, Tessus, and I don't know about Degster, they actually seem like they have like fairly reasonable egos and like they're not going to be like divas, etc. So I also think the structure of the team should work. Surely now you just let people like NiKo be the big ego and zonic and all the rest of it, and then these guys just do their job and do what they're told.
I mean, there's that option. How does Degster feel though, knowing, because we all know that everyone's waiting for m0NESY?
Sure.
What a way! Like, he comes back. I thought that he really looked good during the Shanghai Major. He was doing all the interviews, so much positivity, just kept going on and on about how much he loves this team. Now he's in Falcons, and you must know that there is a clock on top of your head and your time is running out. So we either, we're waiting for m0NESY's contract to run out or for G2 to finally let him go to Falcons. And you know that the moment that happens, you're done. That's pretty crap. I mean, or do you honestly think he's coming in going, Hull, I'm just going to play so well that they're not going to want m0NESY when the time comes?
I definitely think that's what he's going to do. He's going to have to give it his all. He has to make himself seem more appealing than m0NESY. He has to he has to basically just play it out of his mind. I mean, it's not impossible. I mean, the same thing happened with Wonderful when Na'Vi was, like, oh, Simple's coming back to take your
everyone
spot.
Everyone said he's coming eventually. What's even the point? Yes, absolutely.
And Simple's actually the GOAT, and Wonderful proved himself. So, I mean, it's not out of the question for Degster to prove himself to a point where we maybe don't want m0NESY anymore.
Sure.
So, that's the only way, though. That's the only way. Otherwise, you're right. He knows he's playing against the clock, and he just has to make himself look really good.
I will just say, Degster did only have essentially like one season. He came back just before the end of the first season, but it was like he even had an event he didn't attend, like IM Dallas or whatever. So I will say, it's also not necessarily that the Degster we saw last season has to be the Degster that happens this year. I actually think it's plausible he could improve a little bit. I'm not going to say he gets twice as good like m0NESY or whatever, but he could get like 10% better and be like a really serviceable player. Also, I actually think if you look at the rest of the squad, it doesn't have to be on his shoulders. Like, I actually think the key thing for me is just how will NiKo play. If NiKo actually plays like he did in this last season in G2, then we could, the whole conversation changes for everyone involved, I think. Now maybe the whole team can stay, who knows?
Degster versus SunPayUs, because Falcons had SunPayUs. I would argue, maybe some others would argue, that SunPayUs, that when they benched him, it was always such a shock to so many people as to why you would do that. Do you think that Degster's an upgrade on SunPayUs, Thorin?
Ooh, here's the problem. If you mean like last season, probably not. Like, I'll give it to SunPayUs. I actually thought, by the way, it's funny that everyone else has come around now only because he was kicked and because Simple was brought in. I actually told people the whole time, I thought SunPayUs and Magus were the two that obviously looked fine in Falcons pretty much the whole time. But I do think Degster looked like up and down last season, and definitely early on it took him time to get integrated. I thought at the end he looked good. It was maybe a push at that point in time. I think the bigger issue for me is, I'll just put this out there, I'd heard even when SunPayUs was back in Ents that like he can be like, I wouldn't say like a diva, but he could be like a more difficult player to handle, and he's certainly got a strong personality. I mean, he lives up to the stereotype. He's like a hot-blooded fucking Mediterranean guy where I doubt he just takes it lying down when they lose a billion maps in a row. So I also wonder myself if that was also another factor as to why he was the person that they considered removing. So if there was the choice to keep SunPayUs, I wouldn't have hated it. But obviously in this particular case, they had to have Degster for the whole like point system or whatever, because they needed the 3 heroic players, didn't they? So I guess in that scenario, there was no choice, right?
I mean, Austin, for you, there is no choice. So we do agree there. They had to get that call. But if you did have to do the Degster versus SunPayUs, just for, I mean, this is just for fun. Where would you lean to?
I would probably take SunPayUs because I think he's definitely more proven to play like at the higher level. Not that I don't think Degster can, but I mean, what SunPayUs was playing in that ENCE roster, and they did really good at a lot of events. I think they won IEM Dallas.
Yep.
They won Dallas, and I don't know. I would rather have him than take the risk on someone like Degster. But with that being said, like you do have to have the core, so. I don't know. I think it's basically even. Like we're just talking about like experience versus, hypothetical what Degster could do.
Thorin brought up something interesting, which is like a little bit out of the scope of people never focus on this. So we always talk about ratings and we talk about players and we talk about roles. We never talk about personalities. And that is actually a thing that probably plays a far bigger role in a team dynamic. I think it was Apex said it after the major with Vitality, where he insinuated that that they hadn't felt like a team for so long, and it would have appeared that no one was actually getting on very well. And I think maybe what you mentioned there with SunPayUs and in that Falcons roster last year, you've got this really hot-headed, fiery personality who's very loud and passionate and whatever. And then your IGL is Snappy, who's this very stoic Danish, doesn't really show much emotion. Like there must be, and is very, I think my understanding with Snappy is like very clinical, like pitch up at this time, you practice, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do this. Whereas, you probably got someone who's a little bit more, I don't want to say all over the place, that's probably the wrong terminology, but you are going to have those clashes, right? I mean, how hard is it for a coach? Because someone like Zonic, you've got to, not only do you have to find a core so you can get the necessary ranking points so you can stay in competitions, but you've got to find 3 players that you can bring over who are going to work really well with 2 superstars.
Yeah.
How the hell do we go and say someone is a fraud when they're sitting dealing? I mean, this was obviously very different last year, but it is a similar thing where you're working on that stuff. That's hard. And I don't think many people realize how difficult it is to try and balance egos and personalities and then roles and how people play in the server.
By the way, I'll even throw this out there. I always think the most unfair thing about Falcons and zonic is if you remember the timing of when NiKo was supposed to join in 2023, it was when CS2 had barely been out. So we actually knew very little about CS2 versus CSGO. And I'm sure most people did what I did, which is I spent the first year just assuming the rules of building teams and which roles are more important were just based on CSGO. And I have to say, unfortunately, Falcons is the ultimate example that would wreck you for that, because even when you didn't get NiKo, you thought, well, I have one of the best AWPers in the world. It turned out like that's not a thing in CS2. There's Mono CZWoo and everyone else is just an AWPer, if you know what I mean. Like, I think even the same with one. So I actually think a lot of the wonderful criticism was mad overplayed. It's like, bro, what are we talking about? The entire top 20 is just riflers that are all aggro, for fuck's sake. There aren't any, like, lurkers and old school AWPers aren't a thing anymore. They're just like another player in the team. Whereas at the end of CSGO, if you didn't have the superstar rifler, actually a SunPayUs could still have been an MVP player for you or won a big series. It feels like, I don't think he even had the opportunity to do that in CS2. Like I said, unless you really are like Monacy and ZWoo, the players who just break the game, the AWP to me has so much less impact. So if you were, by the way, if it was at all frustrating anyway for you, somebody, imagine adding that in as well. Like your own agency's been removed somewhat. And by the way, remember the whole thing we all used to say about SunPayUs? He was basically the original GL. No one actually thought he was the best player. We just thought he was amazing in big stage games. Well, good team to get in big stage games. He never got fucking played. He only played kind of 8. Basically, that's it. Like, aside from that, he was never even in the matches where normally he would shine. So I feel like it was like the worst of all worlds for SunPayUs. I do notice as well, by the way, even though he was essentially perma-bench and no one even knows where until just now that he was going to like Heroic or whatever. I noticed he didn't particularly complain, though. I'll just say that as well, by the way. I noticed he didn't really seem like he was that mad about it. He just sort of, okay, cool, take me out. Maybe I don't want to be in a losing team anymore. Brilliant.
Austin, do you feel the same about the changes from CSGO to CS2?
I mean, I don't know. I still think the AWP is very hard to deal with, but it could just be like from my own experience. I mean, we're not very good in NA. We're not good at dealing with like AWPers and stuff. So maybe it still feels the same. But I guess at the highest level watching, I guess you don't see a ton of AWP takeover games unless it is from like Monacy or ZywOo. Even actually, I don't even think ZywOo's been opping as much as he did in CSGO. He's been rifling a lot. So yeah, definitely some significant changes to how the AWP is, or well, how AWP heavy the meta is right now. So that definitely makes AWPers in general like less desirable. Yeah, I never really thought about that actually.
Then you also just get less of them with MR12, and especially with the economy and stuff. There's also just like less opportunity to get the gun and get a proper run with it as well, even warm up with it and everything. Yeah.
But it is true that we sort of expected Zonic it was meant to be the superstar team, right? It was going to be this all-star team that you were building for a game that we didn't really know how that was going to look or play out, because that was what you were doing. You were taking a gamble. You were going, okay, this is kind of what I think we need to do. And like he said himself, it wasn't exactly the team he wanted. It was still a good team. But then also, I think a lot of their skills didn't really transfer over into CS2. I don't think that ends core looked as good. So you're stuck in that situation. Whereas with the heroic core joining NiKo, they look really good. I feel like they peaked at the right time. They looked really impressive in the major. Do we think if you add, I mean, Austin said it earlier, Thorin, but adding the firepower, is this we've all agreed this isn't going to be a top 3 team. It's not a team that's going to be in contention for lifting trophies, but a playoffs team for sure.
I personally think it will be. Like, what's funny is, I'm not like super high on them. Like, I'm not going to make some crazy proclamation like they'll win the major. But I actually do think, like, one of the reasons I sort of like the compromise of the 3 they picked up is I feel like it's going to make the roles work in the team, actually. Like, this actually looks, again, like you've got like a lineup like the last heroic, roles at work. But actually, in this case, the difference is I actually still think Nertz has that last gear left to go on his sort of speedometer, as it were, to really hit true superstar state. Sneaker's already there. So that's why I say, for me, it's like, the whole story is just about NiKo. If NiKo comes in as G2 NiKo, I feel like the rest of them, you just assemble around him, and suddenly we've got a team that, like, yeah, maybe it's not top 3 and it's not a lock, but maybe it's like top 5, and, you know, we're in all the quarters and some semis, and then, you know, in a tournament where NiKo can be the MVP, maybe we can win that tournament. Maybe if Degster plays like better at one tournament, suddenly we're in the finals. Who knows? Like, I think here's the key thing for me is the last roster of Falcons, even when Simple joined, that was like a last ditch effort. Everyone's morale was shot in that team. I feel like in this one, everyone should have at least within the squad, should have quite a lot of reason to be hopeful initially and believe things can work and there's something to build off. I also think, by the way, that's an aspect as well that's different. When we took the end score out of CSGO, we also were taking them out of a different game and put them in CS2. Like, we won't know this until we've A/B tested over 2025. Maybe it does turn out some of those players from the ENCE roster just actually weren't that good at CS2. Maybe we just didn't know they had the drop-off because it was masked by the whole Falcons thing. We actually, luckily, already know how the heroic players play in CS2. We just saw that. That's a key difference for me, because I actually, when I say that, I actually get a sense actually now of why I think also people are underwhelmed by the roster. They think it's the same thing again. You took like a good working course, it was ENCE before, now it's heroic, you added in like superstar, and then they think that just didn't work, whereas I think actually this time it should work. Keyword should.
Should. I was about to say, I think that was the majority of the commentary I saw is it's exactly what you did before, slightly better.
Right.
And that was the concern, right? And I get that concern though, Austin.
Sure.
On paper, it does look like it's exactly what you did at the beginning of last year, only slightly better. And at the beginning of last year, what you took on paper should have worked and it didn't. So should this work now? I mean, that's the issue. And like Thorin said, if NiKo plays well, yes, it should work, but you can't put all of that on one player, surely.
I definitely think that Thorin's right. Like, these players are proven to be good, or at least at the, you know, playoff level for CS2. So it definitely will be better, assuming that everything works, as it should. It definitely should be better. The main difference being you have NiKo. I mean, we didn't have anyone like that on the previous roster, so that's already a huge upgrade. The only thing that I'm worried about with this roster is kyxsan IGLing. I don't know how that's going to go. I mean, Magisk, listening to someone that's significantly less experienced than him, NiKo notoriously doesn't like some IGLs. It could be interesting. kyxsan could have a target on his back coming into this team. If they don't like how he calls, or if he calls a couple of bad series, they might already be looking at the next season.
That was actually going to be my next question, though, is he up to the task of being able to take control, Thorin, of two of the biggest names of the game? And because that's the thing, as an IGL, you have to call, but you also have to earn respect. And
sure,
it's difficult to get respect from two of the superstars of the game who probably are going to feel like they know a lot more than you do.
I mean, in their roles, they do, which is half the problem. You're going to have actually have some sort of compromise. The reason why I actually agree with this as like a potential weak spot is, first of all, kyxsan just hasn't done it yet. He hasn't really been on like a contender team that was like day after day in the big matches where you're expected to win and everyone knows your map pool, all those. He's been the underdog every time he ever did anything, even at the end in heroic. Now, if anything, part of why they impress people is people had sort of sold the stock, as it were, metaphorically, months earlier, and thought this squad wouldn't be good. If you look at the last rosters he's had, I will say he's had nobody on this this level. Think about when he was in Apex. His stars were Nork and Jacob. They are mega chill guys if people don't know. Like, they're not divas at all. And by the way, they have super obvious playing styles. Then after that, he had Degster, who's just come back to CS2. You can't really be a diva when you just come back yourself and your own games on. And actually, as far as nerd scores, I wouldn't claim to know him super well, but the interactions I've had, he seems like a super chill guy, by the way, like just a really good personality, very positive person. So I will say, as far as I can tell, he's never actually passed the superstar test. He's never been given someone who, you don't even have to be a diva. You just have to be someone who, as we just said at the beginning of this, like they just know what they're talking about. Like NiKo has proven at this point in time in history, by the way, that whether it's officially called secondary calling, whatever he does in his teams works in all of them. With every IGL and every teammate, by the way, his game always works. So in that level, like actually, if you kyxsan, by the way, that's one thing I'll say on his half. You better be willing to like find common ground with these people, because this is a rare case of where, like, when I've been friends with people at the LXCBs, yeah, if you have like an OG lineup, I'll tell you go in there and alpha him, mate. Like, be the fucking big dog in the room. Tell them if you have a team, you shouldn't even want to do that. You should want to find a way to like meet in the middle. And then the idea is essentially, if you're kyxsan, your real job, mate, is you're there to IGL, TSS, and maybe Megisk sometimes, and a bit of, you know, you and Degster, what you do on the map. NiKo's going to do his thing, and you're going to try and integrate that into your world.
What about that relationship, though, between kyxsan and zonic? Because that's the other one that I think is far more important than people realize, especially in CS2, is coach and IGL being on the same page, figuring that out. How fast, because this is something that we have to point out, they have to perform right out the gates, because there isn't going to be any, I think other rosters are going to be given a little bit of leeway. And while they deserve a little bit of leeway because of Falcons, because of what happened last year, because of this desperate need for the fans to hate on this team, they are going to be given absolutely no leeway.
Oh, they'll get dogged if they lose. Yeah, of course.
They have to perform. Bounty is it. Like, that is it. You will perform. And how hard is it to build a relationship between an IGL and a coach in the few months that they've had to get in there and be able to be calling on the level? Is Zonic's got the majors, but that was it was a Danish team, and obviously there was Vitality as well. But I wonder, is it possible? Is he up to the task of making sure that he's on the same page with his IGL? Do you think, Thorin?
Ooh, that is a tough one, because I will say, I even heard when he was in some of his past teams that actually even people like Glaive and Apex, that it wasn't like it was just pure smooth sailing the whole time, and that they were the two that was all on the same page, IGL and coach. I've heard there was like pushback and friction, and people like having different perspectives and differently aligned, or maybe we should do this and I think we do that instead. So actually, the interesting thing to me is I also think the big task that's been so different for zonic in this particular version of the portion of his career, the Falcons portion, is it's the first time ever in his career he's working with younger players, inexperienced players. Players haven't done it. Every other time he just got almost the finished product. Like when he got the players in Astralis, they were already like that close to winning everything, and they're already beating everyone. Then when he got the Vitality squad, he already had like fully made Zemo, who's been world #1, and he's got like, you know, cracked out play. Even Apex is a mega veteran, even if he hadn't done the role that long. So I will say it's definitely a different skill set. That's the part I actually feel like gets zonic called a fraud. If you don't know the analogy, actually, Sam, they're doing this right now in football, because believe it or not, in football, when Manchester City, what the best team in England for the last like 7 years, their team's had quite a bad season so far. They're still a good team. And so even though their coach is like one of the winningest coaches ever, everyone just says now maybe he's a fraud. And they do the same thing. They say, well, it's because he had all injuries. It's like, well, that's part of being a manager. But his whole sort of brand was almost he gets the best players and the best teams, then he coaches you to the championship. What I think people miss is, I don't know what you feel about this, Austin. I think those are two different things. From my following of sports and esports, those are two different skill sets. It's actually a totally different skill set to manage superstars and the best players. It's really hard in its own way, but it's also a completely different game to manage the people with like the newer players or the players who haven't made it, or sometimes players who aren't even good. I actually think there's a different type of a coach and different type of IGL for each set of them. And I've seen people who I thought, by the way, you could even maybe say this is the final note on Snappy. Maybe Snappy was a small team IGL, as it were. And if you give him the beginning pieces, he makes magic out of it. But maybe if you do, look, I don't think you ever got the NiKo lineup, so I won't judge him by that. But if people want to say this Falcons Foster failed, maybe he's not the guy you put on the big squad with all the pressure and the expectation to win everything. So that's the part I actually am going to judge zonic on. I want to know, can he only work with the best players? What can he do with pieces like we're saying, the unproven pieces like kyxsan, or how will he integrate Degster when he only had 8 months in CS2 or whatever?
It's definitely not an easy job. I think as far as like zonic goes, I think trying to get on the same page with everybody when they all have different levels of experience is going to be very difficult. Like having to get on the same page with kyxsan, who probably, he's new to IGLing, and he's going to feel a lot of influence from all these other players. He might lose a little bit of what he likes to do in all of this, and I think zonic's going to kind of be breathing down his neck, trying to get him to see the game the way he sees it. NiKo's going to be doing the same thing, but then Zonic having to manage NiKo, who NiKo probably thinks he knows way more than, well, he knows it more than everybody. Like maybe he's hard to coach. Maybe he just wants to do it his way no matter what. I don't know. It's definitely not an easy job, but he has always proven himself with like established teams, and I think that with the established players he has, I think they can kind of all work together. I don't envy him in this situation because he's also got all the pressure with everybody calling him a fraud. It's a tough job.
Shall I give you an angle no one's ever brought up, ever? This is a fresh, straight off the presses. This is an angle on Zonic no one ever brings up. No one ever asks this question, which is, what is Zonic's actual perspective on what he is supposed to accomplish at Falcons? Because my problem is this, as far as I can tell, a bit like I just set it up with NiKo, I don't think Zonic just saw, right, I have this menu of options. I'll make up a bunch. I could join FaZe with their coach, they've got Robban's going out. I'll take the Falcons when it has more money. No, I actually get the feeling, a bit like Snappy, he joined this team for all the other things they sold you on. The idea of like, look, this isn't a normal job. It's going to be you for years and years. We're going to build the whole project around you. Think, I don't know, extracurricular things with your family. We can get you this, that, the other, and we can build you a training location, all these extra things. And so the reason I bring that up is this, because even if you are Zonic, even if you are Pep Guardiola in the example I gave in football, under normal circumstances, you actually should just coach whatever's in front of you and just do the best you can with whoever's there. So that means if you're Zonic, in theory, you actually should, by traditional rules, humble yourself and just say, look, forget whatever idea I had of a super team. We want to see that. No, I've got this heroic squad with NiKo and I've got Megas K. What would work with them? What would they like to do? How would they play CS? The problem is, I don't know that is the Zonic that we've got now. I feel like this is the last chapter Zonic. This is the guy who wants to go to the squad, build it from nothing, everything be his say, and he gets, in this sense, the ultimate credit if he wins. Forget that thing of is he a fraud. If he wins a major with this team, no one will ever be able to say shit to this guy, will they? Because he'll have done it all his own way. The problem is, though, as you can see by the way I'm setting it up, that could go counter to succeeding with this roster today, though. That could be, in fact, you could even argue maybe that's part of the problem they had last year. That's even one thing I did used to wonder about Austin. When I used to watch them play, I used to think, bro, they're even way worse than Ents was. And that always made me scared because it made me think like, again, this is what I say about different levels of coaches. Is Zonic trying to coach like perfect Counter-Strike, but with totally imperfect pieces? Because I actually feel like it looked like they didn't compromise in that teammate and make like the sort of like band-aid fixes, I would say, you do immediately. It looked like they kept just trying to go like, now, you know better than that, play world-class CS. It's like it never ever happened. It never ever came online in that sense, which is more alarming.
Yeah, that's actually very true. I mean, with Astralis, that is like textbook way to play CS. Everything was perfect. All the flashes were perfect timed. All the execs, like no miss smokes, no miss pathing, no miss trades. And then having a team like Falcons trying to fit all those pieces. Yeah, you're right. He probably is trying to make it more like perfect. Everything wants to be well drilled and practice in the server before they get into the matches. You're actually right. He probably doesn't know how to make all of these players work together in the same way that they had that super team with Astralis and everything was just, going smoothly.
Isn't that the point, though, about the difference between coaching a bunch of super experienced players versus coaching young players? When you're coaching young players, you need to be a bit more adaptable. You need to understand that maybe their knowledge is not as... Their knowledge, their book is not as deep, right? They don't have certain things. So you do have to make band-aid fixes. You've got to look at the situation. And I think someone that does this really well is Ash from Gamer Legion. Obviously, he finds the best pieces he possibly can to make them work together. And he does find a way to like band-aid some issues. Yes. The issues are clearing. We point them out every time, but they figure out a way to like kind of make it work. I felt like Heroic did that during the major. There were some issues within the team. There were some points where you were looking going, this is a good team, but this might not work. But for some reason, they bandaged it up and off they went. The question is obviously going to be, can Zonic do that? And I don't think that he gets a second season. I legitimately...
Okay, that's
I'm saying
bold.
it.
Okay.
I feel
Thing is,
very
by the
strongly
way,
about
after
this.
Snappy got benched/kicked out, I guess anything's possible. Because I've told you before, I heard behind the scenes he was supposed to get years, mate. And look, I get no one knows it could be this bad, but it was even presented as far as I know. Like, you have like runway of a long time. You don't have to just succeed now. Don't worry, we'll get more players. And then as far as I can tell, they just went, actually, no, this is really bad. No, you kicked like. So maybe it's, by the way, that's like, you're just saying it's speculation. Maybe it's true. Maybe if zonic has no success in 2s, maybe they would boot him. I didn't even consider that's actually impossible, but you have to put it on the table. Yeah, of course.
I think this is something that also, I suppose this also bugs me about the Team Falcons narrative, and I'll go on my little rant here. You always see everyone talking about, they got unlimited money and they'll just buy this and they'll just do this. In my experience, people who have unlimited money are pretty demanding about the results they get from spending money, which is how they were able to get to make as much money as they did. They work in business. There is a return on my investment.
Okay.
And I will happily give you the very big investments for the very big return. And I don't think Falcons is unreasonable. I don't think that they're going to go, okay, we've done this, now win a major. But I think that there is an expectation to see improvements and growth. And the reason I say that is because if you look at what they've done, and maybe for some Counter-Strike fans, they don't know. Falcons, what they're doing in CS, they have done in other titles.
Oh, sure, yes.
But they have seen results.
Yes.
Like they are winning there. They are not investing in Counter-Strike not to win the major. That's what they want.
So basically,
right?
you think that this first season, we're billing it like, don't worry, even if this doesn't work, this is like the Jimphat Modesty waiting room lobby. Don't worry, zonic, they'll be here soon. But you actually think if they don't, they need some results this season, though, in your world. Otherwise, maybe zonic goes too. Or you have considered.
I think they have to. I think that they're going to need playoffs. I definitely think that I think he probably knows that there needs to be some playoff finishes because they cannot. I think maybe there would have been a little bit of grace if they hadn't crashed and burned so spectacularly last year. And it wasn't, I think if they had finished middle of the pack last year, he would have some grace. I think the fact that he hasn't means that coming into this, he will have to get some playoffs. I don't think he's going to have to win a trophy. I don't think he's going to have to win the major, but I think that if they're not performing, there's a very good chance that Zonic's head's on the chopping block. Surely you can't, it has to be like that. Also, I do think that as a team, there's going to be a lot of question marks as to why 2 years running we've had all the things to offer. Why are players not interested in coming here?
Yeah, true.
You are meant to be the coach they want to play with. Last year, NiKo pulled out. This year, they had Jimphat lined up. We've all heard the rumor. It was if Manassi, he pulled out because Manassi wasn't there. He wanted a Manassi. So surely as an organization, you go, okay, why are we not getting the players? I mean, Thorin, you and I have spoken about this. Austin, I'll bring you into this conversation. It's that whole thing of players want to be where they're winning, right? So last year it was, we're not going to get to play the big tournament, so no, we don't want to do it. And then when everything started falling apart, there is that thing of, oh, well, why would I want to go there? Surely as an organization, you start saying to your coach, well, why do they not want to play with you? Why can we're giving you everything you need?
Okay.
That's my like hot take, if you like.
Okay.
But maybe I'm completely off. Maybe Zonic's allowed to keep doing what he's doing. But I think that the fact that you've now had to rush to pick up another call for another year running in like this weird quick fumble is a problem. Also,
my dream, by the way, is that you actually inadvertently have done what I've done before on podcasts, which is none of the things you just said were things Falcons was ever thinking about, but they see this podcast
and I've just done it,
and they go, "Oh, you got a point there." Because I've even done that where I've actually, I won't say which ones, but I've even wrecked myself. I've even done it before, Austin, where I've gone like, they could even do an amazing veto, and then the other team saw that video and were like, "Yeah, we'll just ban that." Like so I have had that before, so because you actually making a good case, I've got to say. Bear in mind, early on we were fairly positive, or we weren't super negative about this move. You've actually built a fairly good bulwark against zonic as a good coach, believe it or not. So fair
Which is terrible because I actually really I adore zonic.
There you go. Okay.
I gotta jump, but that's my other thing because I was like, I don't think NiKo came to Falcons. I'm so sorry.
Oh, supporters like you who needs enemies and haters for fuck's sake.
I know.
Okay.
This is the problem, right? I'm never gonna. This is why I'm gonna end up never working on desks again because everyone's gonna think that I'm just like this horrible, evil bitch. Because sometimes I like to jump to the other side for the sake of a conversation, but I do question if NiKo, when he signed this contract, if they said to him, by the way, these are the players you'll be playing with, if he would have gone, sounds good, I'll leave G2 now. Do you think? I mean, do you think if he... I don't think...
What would your bet be?
No. There's no chance he would have left Monacy and Mulbs and everything that they had going for them in G2. No chance. There's no chance. I wouldn't have if I was him.
The problem I have is this. I actually do think that the way, like, here's what's funny. Because they didn't lose that heroic match, I get the feeling like some people, because FaZe played awesome, like, forgive them for losing that semi. Like, one, I thought it was whack the way they lost to FaZe. And then two, like I just said, I actually think if NiKo himself didn't go crazy, and then mobs on that third map, you just flat out lose to heroic anyway. And by the way, I actually think them losing to heroic would have been way more indicative of what that roster was like. That roster could either win a tournament, but never the big one, you notice, or be in the semis, or it could literally be last place and be irrelevant. It did that. That was what this team was capable of doing. It could lose to really, really bad teams, or it could beat the absolute best teams. So the other part to me is, like, I did get the vibe that NiKo liked some of the players, but if I'm NiKo, I'm thinking to myself, like, one, I can't trust that period because we all knew I was leaving anyway. So it was almost sort of like, let's none of us rock the boat because nobody even knows if we're all here next year or what the roster is. And then two, I also think if you look at the successes he had, this is where the other problem is. This is why I always try to look at each thing from that person's POV. If you're NiKo, a blast doesn't do anything for you, mate. A blast's awesome if you're Malps and you're young in your career, or your snacks and you want to reprove yourself. NiKo's whole career already was that his resume is whack. If you don't know, he's won 1 billion blasts and Star Series and stuff. Like, what he wants is clone kind of eats in the majors. He wants more of those ones. So I also feel like, to a fan, it was enough, especially if you were a fan of the other players. But I don't actually think this last period in G2 was enough if you were NiKo. Again, to me, you've played so long. It's a bit like Ziwu and zonic. At this point in your career, you're only here to win the championship. You're here for the major and the MVPs and the number ones. Is what you're here for.
But can you get number ones and win the major with the lineup you currently have in Team Falcons, Thorin?
Ooh. I don't know if you can be number one, because the problem is, I do feel like if you look how they do it nowadays, you have to make them loads of semis and finals to have a chance to even do that. Like, if people don't know, towards the end of the year, the real reason why I think Donk went from third in most people's Player of the Year list to, like, guaranteed number one. It's just because they made the Blast World Finals final and then they won the major. I think before that, actually, most people were setting Donk up to be third because his team just wasn't as relevant as Vitality and G2. So the problem is, I don't think he could probably be number one, even if you were actually played like even if NiKo played like Donk. I don't know that this team could actually be like high enough up to make you be number one. Praiseway, he was top 5 now. I think he could be top 5 again. Like, if this team really is like 5th or 6th best team in the world, like I say, you make a bunch of semis, maybe you have a 1 tour, 2 tournament wins. By the way, the other thing you can throw in as well is, because these, aside from Megas, aren't huge names, you will get a lot of credit as NiKo if this team wins, by the way, and you carry. If you'd actually have joined the team with the Monacy, Jimphat, and all the rest of it, you could be considered to be carried in that squad. In this squad, they're going to give you a lot of the credit if you do it. So I do think you could still get very high up. You could still be like a 3rd or 4th best player in the world, probably.
Same page, Austin? You think
Yeah,
3rd, 4th?
100%. Yeah, I think that that's probably where they're going to be. I mean, I could see them winning a lot more, but I also could see them not even making playoffs in a lot of events if things just go terribly. So I don't know. I still don't think that if you just present this lineup with those 4 and they're like, oh, NiKo, we want you to join this roster, I think he would have said no. Because with G2, at least you know you're making semis consistently, finals consistently. Like, you have the chance to win those events and, you know, make the deep runs, still get those ranking points to be a top player in the world. I don't think he's happy with this, joining this roster. Well, like, on paper, I should say.
I'll do this thing where I pretend I'm joking, but I secretly mean it. Yeah, but he also has to stay with Taz and fucking Snacks, so...
Okay, that's actually very true. Yeah.
Just throwing it out there, just saying it. Someone had to say it. That's all I'm going to say. Because all I'm going to say is this. There's one thing I do find very interesting, Sam, and that is this. Sometimes in the world of media, it's actually when people don't say something and it's conspicuous they don't say it that gets my brain turning. So here's the weirdest thing. If you saw, obviously, it's not me that much, but it's my enclave of people, isn't it? It's me, Maui, and Kasat. We're the people who've been very critical, not just of Huxley, but of Snacks, of Taz, etc. Now, normally, what people do, the broadcast does it, but I notice the players don't do this. Normally, the players, even if, by the way, the worst thing about pro players is, even if some of them believe behind the scenes and agree with you, this player's overrated or whack, what they tend to do publicly for the fans is do the opposite and go out of their way to message as hard as possible. Like, no, we love this guy. Like, in fact, what you do, by the way, for someone like Snacks is you'd come out all the time like, oh, that round that we won there, that was him. He made that call. For Taz, you'd be like, oh, what you guys don't know is it was like his time out at the end. He just said something to me. They never do these stories. There's no one else noticed that. Like, everyone in the team seems to have almost like radio silence about those two individuals. Like, they maybe comment on what they think about them as people. They never seem seem to comment on their like role though. So again, that could be nothing because I have to say, like, I don't think this last 6 months was a real team. I think everyone knew. Look, NiKo is leaving anyway, and with what's going on with the roster, like Snacks is here temporarily, and we're all just going to see how it works out. I don't even think the expectations were set very high. So I also wonder myself, like, it's very different to go, all right, it's only 3 more months. Plus, I just won that plus. Cool. Let's give this major a try. As opposed to like, well, Snacks and Taz, how do we win the world championship? You know what I mean? Like, that's a different conversation to have.
When is m0NESY? I mean, my understanding is there is a wait for a contract to run out because G2 won't sell him. That's kind of what the rumors are saying about m0NESY. But when
which in itself's weird in itself, right? Because the weirdest thing about that I really don't get is think about what Yanko, correctly by the way, just dissed FaZe for. That FaZe let Twists and Drops run their contract to the end and then just leave for free. Like if you do that, not only is it hard to replace him, but you don't have the money to replace him. You can't use the buyout. So the weirdest thing about this is if you're G2, you're the number one person who should want m0NESY to go today if he's going anywhere. If he's definitely going to leave at the end of the contract, that's way worse for you. Like, unless essentially you win the first major in this first season, like, what did you get out of it? Like, you just kept paying him, and at the end, you don't even get the buyout. Like, remember, the buyout would have been millions of dollars. So that part's weird in itself, because that almost makes me wonder, is this actually that m0NESY doesn't want to join Falcons? Because I find that so weird, because people are making it sound good for GT. Like, oh, they just get to keep him, and then they leave after. It's like, that's worse as far as I can tell. That'll just be worse for them as an org.
That's what so everyone's been on the whole m0NESY goes with NiKo. But where did that start? Just because they looked good together.
What's sad is I believe it was like an overdrive Telegram thing like a year ago or something that we've all just in our brain made like the first block in a Lego castle. And it just turns out that if that block never actually existed, then the whole castle collapses and it was all bollocks. So sadly, I don't know that there never actually was a confirmation as far as I know that m0NESY was going to go, right? It was just that, first of all, if you remember, there was that time where like all the Russian orgs, like C9, there was these weird rumors that he might go to these squads. And then I believe it was an overdrive or somewhat, whoever confirmed initially that NiKo was definitely going to Falcons, pretty quickly on the heels of it, they said m0NESY was going to go as well. So everyone's just assumed it was like a package or something almost.
That's the thing, right? It's been the consistent conversation around m0NESY will be going.
Yes.
But then I thought it was weird when the Jimphat thing happened, because I presume Jimphat's representation would have done a bit of digging, because to turn it down, because what the rumor is that he said I'd go if m0NESY goes. They didn't get m0NESY, he doesn't go, right? But you would think that his representation would say, hey, listen, or Falcons goes, hey, listen, we're getting m0NESY in a couple of months. Come now, we should have him.
Yeah,
the fact that the Jimphat thing was like, cool, I'm staying with Maz, makes me think, and I've been questioning this for a while. I'm like, guys, we're all so confident that m0NESY goes wherever NiKo goes, Austin?
I just completely lagged out, so I missed most of that. So what was the argument?
It's because it's the whole way from Africa to America. The question was obviously non-stop conversations around m0NESY goes to Falcons because NiKo's there. But where did that all start? And do we honestly think that is... Why are we all talking as if that is a guarantee?
Well, I don't really know where it started, but I know that they were really close outside of the game as well, and they had a lot of really good in-game chemistry. So I think that it just is assumed that there's no reason for m0NESY to stay without NiKo on G2. A lot of it is just assumptions, right? And when you have Falcons with an unlimited buyout, it just makes sense that if they're going to take NiKo, that m0NESY is also a target, and he probably just goes. I mean, it makes sense for him to go, so I think a lot of people just connect that in their head and just run with it like, oh, well, he's going to go. It's going to happen.
Imagine he doesn't go. And this is Falcons, and this
could happen.
This is NiKo's legacy. This is how it ends, Thorin. This is the team.
Why do you wait? Why do I have to accept that part of the premise? It's still, like the first part I was okay, like, this could happen. What if? And it was like, and then this is the end for NiKo, and he's dead after the storm. What do you think of that? Look, NiKo's dead on the floor. What do you think of him being dead with no major? It's like, fucking hell, why put this on me? This is heavy as fuck. Holy shit. No, okay. Here's the problem. If this ends up being the last roster, let's just take that premise, right? He doesn't get any extra players. There's no upgrades. This is just the roster he plays on, and then let's say, for the next year. The problem is, this won't accomplish all the dreams he wanted to, or even what maybe G2 hinted that they could have when they had the potential to win the major. That's a bummer, because like I said, I think if you're NiKo, all your decisions in your career now, obviously I can only say this because I'm me and I'm not him. I don't know what his family situation is. I don't know if he wants millions to have a kid or something. He has like a long-time girlfriend. I don't know what is. Maybe he's at kyxsan Yanko. Maybe he wants to have a family. Who knows, right? But if I'm assuming his goals are what I think they are, win the major, be the world number one player, be the best player of all time, then this lineup isn't it. This lineup, you could be the best player ever, but you aren't going to win all the majors doing that probably with this exact 5-man lineup, unless, as we alluded to, a lot of the question marks get resolved. kyxsan is better than we thought. Zonic has a great connection with everyone. Degster comes online. There's no bit. By the way, one thing that goes without saying is there can't be any conflicts within the team. We just assume that there aren't, and hope there aren't. Let's hope there's no, this person hates that person or can't play his style of player. Yeah, it would be a bummer. I think if this is how it goes out for NiKo, it would be a bummer. Because the saddest thing about his career is, I think he has, to me, a really cursed career. Because it's not that he was the guy who never had any help. He's actually had some lineups that were fantastic. The problem is, it feels like, I've always said this about how he plays at majors, but it feels like the same with his rosters. It's like flip a coin each year, right? If it's heads that year, he's going to be awesome at the majors, but won't win it. Then it comes tails. Now he's shit at the major, but doesn't win it either. Right? Flip a coin. Heads. Right? He's got a good roster this year. Doesn't win the major. Flip a tails. Nah, it's not that good this year, but also doesn't win. So it never seems to matter. But he definitely has had some years where if you were the GOAT, people would say you would have won or you could have won. So I think the problem for me is you have to just stack the deck at the end. And this lineup isn't stacking the deck. The Jimphat Modesty one would have been. That would have been a potentially very exciting prospect. Yeah.
So I've been pretty churlish the whole episode, but I am just liking to jump onto the other side and play devil's advocate sometimes. I have to say straight up, and I am going to say, I think NiKo and Magics are not, they're not divas. I think that they are strong individuals, but they're incredible players. But I think that both of them, from what I've seen, they'll get pretty heated, but they work really well in a team. And I'm going to say that the heroic core is a group of guys that are, they're hungry. I mean, this is their opportunity, but they also, you've seen what Tessus has been able to do. I mean, hell, the dude played under Cadian for how long? He's going to work well in that situation. And True. I think that there is...
Well, we know he can handle an out-of-control egomaniac telling him what to do all the time. Oh, sorry, Cadian, I meant. Yeah, Cadian, of course.
Cadian. But I actually think that this team's going to do pretty well. I think that they're going to have a good run. I don't think that they're winning majors. But I do think that we are going to see a far better Team Falcons than what we saw last year.
That's also the weirdest thing is it wasn't even just the results. They also sucked to watch last year. I actually really enjoyed that heroic squad. I thought it was quite a fun team to watch. Like I said, all the roles made sense. So at a minimum, I'll be watching anyway for the drama. But I actually feel like I agree with you. It could actually be a very entertaining team to watch. This could be one of my favourite teams. I'm a big fan of Magisk as well. I always thought his game was dope. So I could actually see this being better than people think. It's why, look, you did a great job supplying all the negativity in this episode. Obviously, we did a Freaky Friday. We swapped the roles or something. But I'm actually quite positive about this squad. I think it's pretty good.
Also, the problem was we started off so positive, and I think we hit the halfway mark, and I was like, if everyone's just going to talk about how good they think this lineup is, we are so screwed for the rest of this episode. So I just changed my hat really quick and just jumped off to
You're also doing the trick that we learned on Hot Take Point Made, which is if eventually you just say every conceivable take, you've just got loads of material to clip later on and go, see, we did on episode 41 say that they might just fail completely and and they might fire zonic, in fact. And then 10 seconds later, maybe they win the major, there's some 2 clips you can use. Whatever, it's like choose your own adventure. Whatever happens, you can just pick the right outcome and take that clip. See you in 6 months on Twitter.
Yeah, whatever happened, I got it right. So there you go. But I mean, also for you, are you excited to see this team? I am excited to see this team play. I think that there's going to be some good CS.
Also, ironically, by the way, that statement you just said is the sort of stupid thing Zonic would say in an interview headline. Basically, I was right no matter what happened or whatever the fuck that line just said was. That sounds like a Zonic interview headline at this point in time.
Too true.
No, I am very excited to watch this team, actually. I just want to see how NiKo plays in a different team environment. I want to see if kyxsan's able to coordinate a team with more experienced players. I'm interested to see if Degster can rise to the occasion. Really, he's fighting for his spot here. I want to see if Magisk can return to former glory. And, Tessus, he's just that guy. He fills the gap, so he's just that guy.
He's just that guy.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this team.
I have a fun final question because I've just thought about it. So Manasi comes to Falcons. Who gets replaced by Jimphat?
Ooh, yeah, that's the tough question, right? Because in theory, role for role, it probably should be Magisk, right? Which, by the way, if you think about it, in your brain, I'm sure you probably think similar to me, Austin, your brain goes, you can't replace Magisk with fucking... But I tell you what, in CS2, and without the last year's, you would. I'm sorry, that is actually a deal you would make. So that's another example of where, just like Sonic, just like your name can fall away faster in this game, mate. Because I have to say, I'd do that upgrade if I had to.
Unless Magis wants to switch roles, or they make Jimmy try to switch roles, because I feel like that's something that very much could happen, because they want to keep Magis on the team. They're like, we're not replacing him, so you're just going to learn new roles if you want to be on this team. So
that was fun.
It could be like Tessa's getting replaced for Jimmy.
Oh, by the way, one thing we didn't even mention, but to be fair, it's whatever, is I also think part of why people are so underwhelmed by this squad is because I actually think everyone's forgotten the order of the drama, which is when the original announcement was Simple's coming in on a trial. Well, the premise of the trial, you're thinking of it like you lease before you buy, don't you? So what people thought was, well, if he plays well, at least he'll be there. So the premise was, if you're NiKo, it's like, look, worst case scenario, it's me and Simple, or it's me and Monacy. Well, that sounds very different. That's the question I really want to know, Tech Girl. Was he aware there was a third option? Degster said, whoa, I thought it was Monastery or something like that's what I'd like to know. I'd like to stop this guy down, some sodium pentothal into the neck, and then just, look, that wouldn't be my first question, but it'd be on the list.
One day when you get to do that look back interview, Thorin, we need to know from NiKo, what was the lineup he was actually promised?
Reflections with NiKo and Thorin from a CIA black site, where I have actually captured NiKo, and then he will now answer for the next hour incredibly in-depth questions about Carrigan and FaZe in 2018. We'll finally get to the bottom of all that. Yeah.
We're waiting for it. That is the episode. We are done. Let us know what you think of this Falcons roster in the comments, and we'll see you very soon for another one.